Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's an honor to welcome you to today's panel hosted by the Center for Public Safety and Justice at the University of Virginia. The center was established to serve as a hub for innovation, education, and collaboration in public safety and law enforcement. Our mission is to bring together practitioners, researchers, community leaders to address the evolving challenges and changes in law enforcement, criminal justice, and public safety leadership. Today's discussion is a testament to that mission, bringing together experts to explore critical issues, share insights, and to advance solutions to make impacts. Today, we're especially fortunate to have the panelists that we do and to have our moderator, Michelle Wucker. Michelle is a renowned strategist and author, best known for her work on decision-making, risk management, and leadership in uncertain environments. Michelle is a part of our Master of Public Safety faculty, and look forward to having her moderate the conversation today. I want to thank each of our distinguished panelists for lending their expertise and being a part of this important conversation. With that, thank you everyone for tuning in, and I'll turn it over to Michelle to lead us in today's discussion.
Thanks, Ben, for that warm introduction, and thanks to all of our panelists and everybody who is here in the room. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. We've got a great panel here. I'm just going to introduce them super briefly and put their longer bios in the chat. We've got Ellen Gibson, who's the head of learning, training, and development at Police Scotland. We've got Michael Hughes, former director of Interpol in Washington, and Vaiko Vaher. I'm sorry if I butchered your last name. We've had some technical difficulties trying to test. Who's the head of the operational bureau at the Estonian Police and Border Guard. We've got a lot to talk about today. I think particularly in such in the world we live in today, international policing is so important because of so many issues that cross borders, whether technological or immigration, customs and border, which often have many touch points with traditional police agencies. So we're going to be talking today about some of the things that we should know from other countries, some best practices from other countries, some of the things that police should know perhaps about large communities from other countries in their jurisdictions, ways to coordinate with other agencies that are who's got their toes in something international and in local community. So many issues that come up. So I'm going to start out, rather than belaboring introductions, to ask each of our panelists to briefly talk a little bit about what's important about international policing and the roles that they've had and the current concerns they have now, and why today's panel is such an important conversation to be involved in. And in absolutely no particular order, I'll start with Michael Hughes.
Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, depending on where you're at. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Mike Hughes. I spent 34 years in policing and law enforcement, working the streets and then progressing my way up to the senior leadership roles. I've been involved in international policing, including being the director of Interpol for the United States and serving on the board of directors of the Interpol organization. This is an extremely important topic that is great to be talking about right now at this particular time. For this webinar in particular, I think that exploring generally communication and collaboration amongst police forces, not only domestically, but really globally, how we communicate internationally, because of the need to keep our communities, countries, and the world safe. As far as messages get across, I'll stick with that, communication and collaboration. There's so many procedural hurdles, technical hurdles to abide by. We, the good guys, I say, the good folks, have all these rules and things that we need to abide by, but the bad folks in the world don't have these rules. So we need to be operating as efficiently, effectively as possible to make sure that we're keeping the world safe. Thank you, Michelle.
Great, thank you. Vaiko, Vaher, did I pronounce it right? Close to right?
Yes, mostly right. So hi everybody, it's really great to be here. It's already evening in Estonia, but also good morning, good afternoon, and everything else too. So I'm, as Michelle introduced me already, my name is Vaiko Vaher. I'm the head of the operational bureau. Formerly, I worked as a SWAT unit commander in one of our regional units, and before that, I worked in military intelligence. So I'm a little bit peculiar. I have a little bit peculiar career. International cooperation crime, I think, as we are a part of the European Union, and that doesn't really know borders. Unfortunately, crime in the European Union also doesn't know borders. So it's a little bit a two-way street. So we really love our freedom of movement between cities, towns, countries, but we really don't love the freedom of movement for criminals. So for that, we have had, or we have to have a really good cooperation. Fortunately, Europol, Eurojust, and all the other Euros that are in European Union are providing a really good framework just to do that. We have tens of different databases and ways of sharing information. And from my own experience, I think we have a really good cooperation, at least inside the EU, and also together with Interpol outside the EU also. So really looking forward to have a nice conversation, and I'm really grateful for being here. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And Alan Gibson.
Thanks, Michelle, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone as well from Scotland. So, yeah, I have 30 years police experience with the Police Service of Scotland, which is a pretty new organisation in policing terms. It's only 12 years old. But much as my fellow panelists have said, communication, collaboration, sharing of best practice across boundaries. And I think globally, we're probably dealing broadly with the same issues, just in different geography. So whilst we sometimes are separated by oceans and by seas and by language, we are often dealing with the same things. So I think as Michael said, I think we need to work smart and we need to work together to be able to fight people who don't follow the same rules and follow the same kind of restrictions that we do within public safety and law enforcement. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the conversation today, Michelle. I think there's lots to talk about.
Great, thank you all. And I think this theme of communication is so important, ranging from the perceptions of risks, the language people are speaking themselves, but also so many underlying practices and expectations. So I wanted to start actually by talking about the nuts and bolts. In different parts of the world, we've got very different ideas about what the police are and the agencies that they are involved with. In the United States, we've got lots and lots of local level agencies, whereas in Europe you've got this cross-border dynamic that's very different from us in the United States, and their interactions with global or regional organizations like INTERPOL, like Europol, AFRIPOL, and then also the various agencies within countries. I know that in the United States, we've been having a big debate about the relationship between local police and immigration authorities. And in many cases, there are touch points between domestic or international intelligence and sometimes even financial bodies. So would like to just kind of go back very briefly to all of you and talk about which are the agencies that are in touch with each other, and particularly highlighting some of the differences that we might see between Europe and the United States. So maybe starting with Vaiko.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it really brief because I think we have the most easiest of systems. So as the name says, we have Estonian Police and Border Guard Board. That means that we only have one federal police border guard, and the name doesn't say it, but also immigration services are under one umbrella. So that makes the information sharing really easy. It doesn't matter if it's nationally or internationally. We have a separate tax and customs board or organization, and also I think, as most of the countries, you have foreign intelligence and internal security service. For us, the Europol framework makes the information sharing really easy. All the European Union countries have to have a single point of contact for all things related to, I don't know the good word, but let's call it security. They have to man it 24/7, and we use information system called Siena for changing information. So we have had lots of good stories about it. And one thing I think that makes it, or makes European Union or European law enforcement really unique is that we use a lot of joint investigation teams. Eurojust, who is responsible for all the justice-related matters in the European Union, basically provides a platform or a framework that makes information sharing much more easier, and also makes it possible for example, if we have an joint investigation team, for example, with Spain, the Eurojust framework or platform makes it or allows us to change all the information that regards this investigation, so we don't have to send or also sign some different agreements for information sharing. If we want to move our experts to Spain, if their legislation allows it, we can do that. So we don't have to go through all the hoops that usually come with international police cooperation. And also our internal security service or our foreign intelligence. I don't know how much you know about Estonia, but it's 1.3 million people, about the size of New Hampshire and Vermont combined. So we have a small amount of people, so the information sharing is pretty seamless. Everybody knows everybody. And also with our nearest and dearest partners, we have a really good bilateral cooperation. European Union-wise, Europol-wise, to be honest, we really don't have big problems when it comes to information sharing or working together with other countries.
But do you have any touch points with other parts of the world? I'm assuming most of it obviously geographically makes sense that it's Europe, but I imagine that occasionally you've got touch points, with the US, with Asia, with Latin America. How do you handle those?
Yeah, we have a really good cooperation with the FBI. We have changed information, or mainly we get help from when it comes to biometrics or DNA, since the FBI has a really good competence in that. To be honest, talking with USA is difficult. We like to keep things really simple. So we have our own police attaché working in our embassy in Washington. But I think most of people living in the US know that I don't want to sound rude, but in my opinion, you have a little bit too many police or law enforcement agencies, and it makes sometimes it makes a little bit difficult finding the right person or the right unit for the help we need. But in general, the cooperation is good.
Great, thank you. Alan, how about you? And particularly, within the UK, it's obviously a very different set of configurations from the United States, but some similarities. What are the what's your agency configuration in Scotland? How does it interact with the greater UK and Europe and other parts of the world?
Oh, thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I'll start with Scotland and then work out the way globally. So we're really fortunate, like Vaiko, we're a one agency organization, one country organization. So Police Scotland came into being in 2013. So it was formed from a range of other organizations which folded into one. It was quite a challenging transition, but we have 23,000 staff, of which there's 16,500 sworn officers. So we're the second biggest policing outfit in the UK. So we're in terms of information sharing and operational policing and everything about decision making, it's actually quite straightforward because we're one organisation in one country. We also have arranged, to answer your question about partnerships and interagency collaboration within Scotland, we have a specific focus with our partners on organised crime and counter-terrorism, as many people on the call will have too. So we're very fortunate. We have a single crime campus. It's one location with 22 agencies within it, ranging from intelligence to operations to customs and excise, immigration, and they share information and partnerships physically in one building, which allows us to be at the forefront of thinking in terms of specifically organised crime and counter-terrorism. When you take it out with Scotland into the UK as a whole, England and Wales have 43 different agencies, so it gets a little bit clunky. And to Vaiko's point, is it sometimes gets a little bit more challenging to find the right person and the right organisation to do the right business. But 43 obviously is not a huge amount compared to some other parts of the world. When you move into the European space, we used to have it easy, like our Estonian colleagues, but we decided some point in recent history, as many people know, to come out of the European Union, which has created some challenges for us as an organisation, as a country, because we don't enjoy such freedom of information sharing and cooperation as we did, not because we don't want to, but because obviously the challenges of removing ourselves from the European Union has given us some challenges. But to be fair, our 27 European partners are very good. We work very closely with them and we share information as much as we can within the arrangements that we have. When you look internationally, again, we have a really strong international footprint, both operationally and also through collaboration through learning and development, for example. So we are probably the most active UK agency in terms of sending officers and staff internationally and also bringing people into our organisation to learn, to develop and to share. So for example, we currently have 12 officers from Zambia and Malawi within our learning and development function right now, learning about investigating crime. So we have officers that deploy across the world, like other organisations, I'm sure, on this call as well. So yeah, it's quite an interesting picture, but very not dissimilar to what Vaiko described in terms of Estonia.
Thank you. And yeah, your point about sharing information is very well taken. I think there are different information standards, data privacy things, and in different parts of the world. In a little bit later, perhaps we can all delve into those a little bit more, as one of the things we do want to talk about today is areas for greater cooperation. And your mention about some of the African participants in training is also very well taken, because that's another area we want to get into, is how do we share best practices, where can training of one group help another. So thank you very much. And Michael, with the Interpol, you've got, I think, both the US perspective and the big global perspective. So very interested in hearing your point of view.
Thank you, Michelle. And what Alan and Vaiko says, it really resonates, because in dealing with other countries internationally, that's typically what I found, how it works. There's one, maybe two, three at the most federal agencies. So the reach out, being able to find somebody to help is, I think, a little easier, as opposed to here in the United States. We have over 100 federal law enforcement agencies, over 135,000 full-time federal agents. That's just federal. And then you get into the state, the local, the tribal, the territorial, and that accounts for another 18,000 departments with over, close to a million folks working in those agencies. And when I give talks and gave talks with Interpol and other areas, when I talk about United States law enforcement, you can just see the eyes get wide, especially if people don't know. And when you say 18,000 departments, that's hard to coordinate. And that's what I did with Interpol, is try to coordinate the state, local, tribal, territorial, in addition to the federal departments here in the United States, to have a central point of contact. There are 196 member countries in Interpol, and all the member countries have a unit, a National Central Bureau within their federal police force. So Being able to connect United States law enforcement and other country law enforcement together through Interpol channels, the I-247 network in particular, was very, very effective. I think that maybe some countries or some officers don't know about it. We need to do a better job in educating folks on how to do that, but it is an extremely, extremely effective tool to connect law enforcement internationally. And also, we have to keep in mind our law enforcement attaches in other countries and the ones we have here as well. Working with the embassies and with the foreign ministries has been extremely beneficial in being able to link people up. The State Departments, the law enforcement networks within the embassies are an extremely effective way to make sure we're communicating with the right person in the right agency or department between the US and other countries as well. And then what really works is we all have a lot of time in law enforcement. So over the years, as we travel, as we work cases, as we work bilateral and multilateral cases and communication, we develop a network. And I found that that network has been extremely useful because even if the person I know isn't the right person in Italy, for example, with their national police, the Polizia di Stato, if that person is the right person, they can hook me up with the right person or know who to go to. And so I worked a lot as a broker here in the United States to make sure that we're connecting the right people, which is a lot of what Interpol is about. We have this huge organization that has an amazing network, and utilizing that has been really beneficial. But it can be hard at times, especially here in the US. But I found that working the right channels, we eventually get to exactly who we need to be talking to. Thank you.
Thank you. I see there's actually a chat, a question in the Q&A. What are some challenges a centralized model presents? I see Alan's already typing an answer, but we will go into a little bit more on comparisons and best practices and things later on. But do want to encourage all of you, if you do have questions, please use the Q&A function, and we will keep an eye on those. We will have a questions section in a little while, so we will address those verbally if they haven't been sufficiently addressed in the chats. So thank you. Thank you for kicking us off, anonymous attendee who brought that great question. I actually want to go to the training question, which Alan brought up. What sort of just to ask Alan to follow up on this a little bit, what sort of joint opportunities are there for training and for joint training exercises, for sharing of best practices and things like that? Both the ones that you work with, and if the other panelists have other ones you want to jump in with, please feel free to do so as well.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, there's so much in this space, to be honest. We're very fortunate to have really strong relationships with a range of different countries and organizations. So to give some examples, we've as I said earlier on, we have a really strong international policing development footprint. So we welcome colleagues from across the globe into our facilities in Scotland. So for example, this past year, we've had the FBI National Executive Institute be hosted in Scotland. We've had a global GPX leadership program, which just finished up a couple of weeks ago, with attendees from Chile, Brazil, Canada, Australia, Singapore, the Netherlands, Germany, to name some of the countries. We also are members of, and have been for 20 plus years, the Leadership and Counterterrorism Programme, which some colleagues might know about. That was born in Scotland with colleagues from the FBI and colleagues from the PSNI in Ireland. on the back of the 9/11 atrocities. So we've got a strong and quite a historic footprint in terms of sharing best practice internationally, both in person and more often now online. So we do, like this webinar, we do more and more online to try and share information, best practice, and build relationships with colleagues across the globe on an online platform. That said, I don't believe you can really beat the face-to-face interaction of getting colleagues in a room together, whatever the geography may be, to share information, share good practice, to share their knowledge, experience, and also share the problems. Because as I mentioned earlier on, I have found in the last 30 years that internationally many of the problems are shared. And actually the solutions quite often lie within the room of colleagues who can come together and work through the problems and actually come up with hopefully meaningful ways of taking it forward. So that's kind of my kind of initial thoughts on your question, Michelle. We also send officers and colleagues overseas, again, I guess as good global citizens. And you mentioned Africa earlier on. We send officers to both Malawi and Zambia, specifically to look at violence against women and girls in those countries. And we do it in two ways. One is to help upskill our colleagues in the African police services, but also to give them the equipment to do their job. So we'll put in ICT infrastructure, we'll put in other types of meaningful physical support in country to help them build skills and expertise to make their particular jurisdictions safer and their communities safer. And it's, again, trying to be a good global citizen. And we do that in line with our kind of government policy of international development. So I'll pause there in case you want to come back with anything.
Great, thank you. Michael, you look at things from a very global perspective. Do you want to weigh in on other opportunities for joint training, joint sharing of best practices and information?
Yes, Michelle, thanks. And like Alan said, there are a lot of opportunities out there. It's just sort of figuring out where to find them. I think here in the U.S. we do, the FBI National Academy has been extremely helpful in bringing people overseas and coming here and sharing best practices, but also bringing it back home and being able to get out there into the global community to be able to share those. Department of Justice has the ICTAP, the International Criminal Investigative Training Assistance Program, which goes into other countries and shares best practices, in addition to the Overseas Prosecutorial Development Program, assistance and training. So there are a lot of things we do here in the U.S., but there's also, I think we need to remember that not only do we have the government organizations, but we have to remember other organizations like the United Nations that provides training, like INTERPOL and all the pols, AFRIPOL, AMERIPOL, Europol, that provide training in a regional and global format. The International Association of Chiefs of Police, they're all really important. We have the domestic organizations like the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association, Fraternal Order of Police, National Sheriff's Association, the Police Executive Research Forum. These are all organizations that really try to look at ways that we could come together and look at best practices, what we're doing in policing, and provide that training to the police officers to make sure we're consistent. But those we can't forget about those international opportunities, those global opportunities, not only country specific with the government organizations, but also those other international organizations that are assisting to make sure policing and public service officers are safe, and we're doing things a lot better.
Great, thank you. And Vaiko, the other day we were talking about something that in Estonia that I think other police agencies would be very interested in learning about. I think you mentioned there was a poll on a trust of police and border guards, and it was an astonishingly high 86%, which, considering the events of the last few years in the United States, is absolutely mind-blowing. So I'm wanted to ask you about that, sharing that best practice. Have you been able to identify learning points that you could share with other countries? But also would love to hear your answers about what what your people do to learn from other countries, and also any information exchanges that they do to share some of your best practices.
Yeah, thank you. Really good question. I'm going to start from the ending, and then I will come back to our super high trust. So I don't like to sound as a salesman for the EU already, but we heavily rely on CPOL, the European Union Agency for Law Enforcement Training. As Michael also mentioned, it's a really great structure to also get the formal training, but since it usually involves everybody from the 27 member states, it's I think the best place for networking, and also to get the right context, or at least maybe not the right context, but at least the contact that will get you the right contact afterwards. Since we're also a former Soviet Union country, and I think we're really lucky that we got off with the right foot in 1991. So we heavily rely on different kinds of IT systems. So one of our, I think, things we really like to do is to change experience with similar states, starting from Moldova, ending up with Ukraine, where we just were last week. And I think, yeah, since we're a really small country, we try to keep things efficient, and usually, in best cases, efficiency also leads to smarter solutions. So we're more than happy to share our different ways of conducting our business. But about the trust, yes, it's true. Our trust currently is 87% amongst the population. And since I was a little bit preparing for the question, I looked also to the methodology that the poll is taken. It's not our own poll. It's not police officer questioning criminals with coercion. It's actually a poll that we ordered from a private company, and the confidence level is plus minus 3.1%. So it's pretty much in the low 80s or high 80s, depending on how you look at it. But when we started 30 years ago, our trust was 17%. So we had more than 70% in 30 years. As most former Soviet Union countries, we started with police taking bribes, corruption, police violence. Some of our police officers couldn't speak Estonian, and so on and so forth. What we basically did was we fired a lot of people. We raised the salary for police officers, because we pretty quickly understood that if the police officer doesn't get the salary from the country, he will get it somewhere else, and in form of bribes, for example. And we started with a really, really great and transparent system. So we started acknowledging our mistakes. We started having much better communication with the public. We basically do 4 things. So the first is that everything that doesn't need to be secret has to make public. I think all of us here, at least some of you that are involved with law enforcement, know that we have some things regarding law enforcement work that has to be confidential, personal data, tactics, so on, so forth. Even if we cannot specifically talk about the case, what we discovered, since the court hasn't been in proceedings already, we always talk how we did it or why we did it. Another thing is that we never make excuses. I know it's difficult, but if we make a mistake, our aim is that we inform the public before investigating journalism or whoever finds it out. So if we make a mistake, we acknowledge it, we say it's our fault. And we have realized that the public is pretty forgiving if we are honest with them. The third thing is that we only address public when we're 100% true about the information. We have had some cases that we give an interview and say that this or that happened that way. And afterwards in court, our body-worn cameras are shown, and we're not always 100% sure, but we try to be at least. And the last thing, I think it's really important. I know that some countries do it differently. The spokespersons or persons that talk about or police work or give interviews about events or criminal investigations, so on, they're always the police officers that are involved with the case. So we have our own. We don't have dedicated spokesperson. Every police officer, depending on his or her position, has to be ready to speak in front of a camera, give an interview, and so on. We have press people, but they're press officers. But their main goal is to prepare the spokesperson. And if you look Estonian news, basically, I think every evening or every night there's a police officer talking, and they're not only commanders or chiefs of police, they're just regular patrol officers or sergeants that give interviews on the scene. And doing these 4 things, I think we have really accomplished a great trust with the public. But on the other hand, we're, I think, always one step away from breaking the trust. As I think we all know, we are people also, and sometimes we mess up, but better to have great trust than to start from the low trust and start building from there. So yeah, that's our success story, if I could call it like that.
Thank you. Yeah, and as we know, it's hard to build trust. Sorry, I don't know if you hear my little canine police officers keeping us safe from a gang of imaginary home monsters here. Anyway, you've basically brought us back to communication, and you've spoken to the human side of communication. But I wanted to turn to Michael with some questions about the more technical side of communication. One of the things that's come up in the class that I teach with Gordon Graham is that, there's sometimes people, communicating on different frequencies. And of course, internationally, you've got different standards for data privacy. So, and we've already talked about how hard it is sometimes just to find the people to communicate with. So Michael, could you share a little bit about some of the challenges around how communication's done, like what can be done over email, what has to be done in secure systems, what are the technologies for on-site situations, or how does the technical side and the privacy regulation side play into how police communicate internationally?
It's it depends. I'll give the attorney answer there. A lot of it does depend on what the information is, and if you're dealing with classified information or more information that needs to be protected, there are certain rules that would need to be followed, as opposed to other things that may be exigent circumstances or some other reason, non-classified information that could be shared over a phone, over a non-secure phone. But also, it's the country's communication systems are very different. I dealt with very sophisticated communication systems, and we have the Sienna system. We're a Europol partner, and we're able to communicate because Europol has a 27 EU has a 27 member countries, plus Schengen countries, plus other partner countries that could be participants in Europol, and to be able to communicate on those secure networks, it was very helpful. In addition to the INTERPOL I-247 network and some other communication systems that are quite sophisticated. But then there are some countries that dealing with some offices, it could be they may not even have Wi-Fi service, or they have Gmail accounts as their official accounts. It could be very hard. So utilizing embassies or other in-country governmental offices could be beneficial as well, or worked as well. The data privacy, I'm not sure. I just want to be careful where I go here. Because data privacy is really important, and the rules of the road differ around the world. As we see, the EU has some of the most strict data privacy laws, and we all have to be mindful of that as well. And then when you're looking at access to data and looking at, I don't want to get ahead if you're going to be talking about this, but like lawful access and encryption, that's a huge, huge concern right now in the law enforcement space. There's a lot of work going on, a lot of negotiations going on what could be shared, what should be shared, what should we get from social media and other areas, other companies as well. We are a digitally connected world, right? We heard Vaiko and Alan say before, we don't have borders anymore when it comes to crime. We're so digitally connected. You could have someone in a country sitting in a basement just committing crimes and infractions all over the world. So it's that balancing of privacy. There's the myth that law enforcement opposes strong encryption. That's not true. We support strong, but responsible, managed encryption. But it should be designed to protect privacy, but also managed in a way that if there's a lawful court order by a country to gain access because there's a crime that may be being committed, there needs to be a way to facilitate that as well. So it really differs, Michelle, depending on the country and the type of crimes that are being dealt with.
You. And I want to circle around to Alan on this point, but also wanted to thank him for being so diligent in responding to some of the questions that have been coming in the Q&A. And so I know that some of the participants may be tuning in on phones and can't see the chat. I just wanted to raise those. One question about what are some challenges that a centralized model presents, and he mentions remaining locally relevant to the communities that are served. And that it's a challenge of balancing consistency across the country, but also providing bespoke, responsive, and relevant local policing. We had another question about how people are thinking about how AI technology will benefit or hinder law enforcement. And Alan said, like many technologies, he suspects it will both hinder and help. And we're still trying to understand the challenge and opportunities, but are working with other agencies in the private sector. And then a question for Vaiko and Alan about what countries to look at as models for best practices. Alan very diplomatically says no one specific country, but there's so much that they've learned from every country and agency that they've interacted with, and no single country has all the answers. But everyone has pieces of the global public safety jigsaw, which I love the way you've put that. And then in many countries, the countries with the most modest and simple resources have some of the best, clearest responses. So thank you for that. And again, to encourage all of you to put your questions in the Q&A so that we can respond to them. So with that, Alan, going back to you, if you want to elaborate more on any of those questions, and also to talk a little bit about the technology challenges. There's an example I remember from who knows where, but with say, subway safety, when police and underground officials and other counterterrorism officials were all trying to work together on something, and not all of them always had the same technology to communicate on site. So how do you deal with some of those technological challenges? And if you would like to address any of those Q&A a little bit further, please go ahead and do so.
Thanks, Michelle. I'll probably just cover the last point that you mentioned there in the Q&A, which was about the modest resources. So when spending time with colleagues in Africa, they have limited resources in some parts of Africa, but actually their focus around about specifically community policing models is really impressive. So actually what it showed me is you don't have to have billions of pounds, dollars, or euros to actually have a really effective service. You just have a really clear purpose and mission, and actually need to carry out with professionalism and diligence. And that's what I saw in Africa. So that was the kind of genesis of the point that I made in the chat. So in terms of technology, yeah, I don't have the expertise that Michael has in that space. But what I would say is, again, there are limitations, certainly in the European environment, as Michael mentioned there, in terms of data sharing and data privacy, which are stringent. We do have challenges in that space as a national policing agency. So, for example, I'm on Zoom right now. If my boss finds out, I'm in trouble, because we don't use Zoom in UK policing. We're not allowed to, but don't tell MD. Hopefully, he's not tuned in. Things like WhatsApp, again, we don't use it in UK policing. Australian policing doesn't use WhatsApp either. So there are challenges in the technological kind of space regarding what technology we can and can't use, and also data privacy as to what information we can and can't share. But there's good practice out there. So I'll refer back to Leadership in Counterterrorism programme. That programme is a 5 Eyes programme. So for those that might not know, that's Australia, New Zealand, UK, Canada, and the USA. Has been going for 20 some years. And that programme, they have explored in great and infinite detail. And these are leaders in that space, either federal or local law enforcement leaders from those agencies and countries, who are looking at best practice in relation to information sharing and protocols around about that. And there's been some great work in that space to advance that, so that with obviously one of the most challenging subjects that we face in global policing, which is counterterrorism, how do we keep our citizens in every country safe? And again, that has seen, I think, great advancement over recent years in terms of how we share information legally, appropriately, but comprehensively and quickly, so that we can keep our communities and our public and our countries safe. So there is some really good examples out there of where we have done it well, and we have, I wouldn't say overcome, because we're not trying to overcome legality, but we're just trying to find the most efficient way of sharing information. And there's some really good examples where we've thwarted significant attacks on some of those countries through effective and appropriate information sharing. So I'll stop there, Michelle, and let others come in.
Great, thanks. I want to turn towards wish lists, how we can make things better. And this is a question for all three of you. Where are the areas where you would love to see improvements? So whether the kind of information you get, the kind of collaboration internationally, where are the gaps? Where are the things that we could be aspirational on, looking at improving international cooperation, whether that's involving communications or just specific operations or sharing of best practices? Vaiko, do you want to start out?
Not really. It's a really great question, and also a really difficult one. I think operational sharing wise, I think all the countries, and I don't mean all the 200-ish countries in the world, but all the culturally similar countries or Western countries, however we want to call them. I think when it comes to sharing immediate threat information, I think in that region we're pretty good. I remember last summer we just got the information from Netherlands that there was one Estonian citizen planning a terrorist attack in Estonia, and it was like a flash report. It was, I think, I haven't seen information being shared so fast, or bytes and data moving that fast. I think one thing we could improve on generally in police work is because we also always like to talk about our success stories, that we're doing this the best and this is our success story and all the great improvements that we all do. But in my opinion, and it's my personal opinion, we really don't like to mention the not so success stories. I'm pretty sure that Michael and Alan also in their career have seen maybe hundreds of success stories, but also hundreds or thousands of not so success stories. And I think maybe the honesty part, or if you get together But on the other hand, I'm pretty sure you cannot have honesty without trust. So if we want to be honest amongst each other, we have to cooperate, collaborate. We have to meet face to face. Maybe in the evening we have to have a dinner because. But yeah, just to keep it, I'm starting rambling already. But I think success stories are great. But in my opinion, or me personally, I'm even more interested in what went wrong or what didn't happen, or because I think the best experience is to learn from each other mistakes. So, for example, if we have a great idea of doing, I don't know, AI, whatever in our police, but Scottish police or police of Scotland already had done it. It would be really nice to know that, okay, guys, we already tried it. It didn't work because this, that, and so on. I think that would be really insightful. And also maybe other thing, emerging crime trends. We have had some, at least in Europe, we have had some crime trends that have started in one country, moved to another country, then it moves basically like COVID-19. And we have realized that some of the member states already had the information, or they already saw the trend happening, but they just didn't share this information, because law enforcement work on one hand is really international, but on the other hand it's really national, because we usually solve problems, and I think all the countries in the world don't really like to have problems. And being honest about problems, I think that's one of the most important things. But before that, we should have trust. So yeah, long story short.
Great answer, thank you. Michael, how about you? What's your wish list?
Yeah, what Vaiko said really hit home, because I always told, you learn from your good bosses and you also learn from your bad bosses. There's always lessons to be learned, and there's same thing with operations. Sometimes we learn more from the bad or the failed operations as opposed to the successful ones, and we need to be, as Vaiko very eloquently put, be honest and truthful in the way we talk about these, to be able to get better, because that's what it's about, always trying to improve. Once we get to a place where we say, we got it, don't need to learn anymore, that's your time to leave. That's your time to get out of your job, because we always have room for improvement anywhere we're at in our personal or professional lives, and we always need to be looking to get better. I'll just touch on the gaps question you brought up as well. Again, I think it's the lack of technology, the need for better communication and collaboration. And when you're dealing in a global environment, you just have a lot of different levels, as Alan brought up. Also in some of the African countries, they don't have, or other countries around the world that don't have the technology, that don't have the equipment, but they find ways to get around it and get the job done. But imagine if they did have that technology. And in the US, one of the things that we've done, and not only the US, but other countries who are fortunate enough to have resources, capacity building projects, getting out there to countries that may not have the resources or we have even a laptop, Wi-Fi connection. We talk about 5G networks. There's some places around the world and countries that don't have 3G or just basic Wi-Fi capability, which causes very severe problems. But having capacity building projects to be able to share them with other countries, it's not a waste of money to go and help them, because if we could stop crime in places around the world, that means it's not getting to your country. We could stop it out of our borders. It's not getting to your borders, no matter what country you're at. We got to stop it at its root, where the root is, but also at its infancy stage, hopefully. You look at even nuclear security, CBR, the chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, explosive security around the world. You look at some of these nuclear facilities, there's no security. You're lucky if there's a fence around it in some countries. And to get out, it may not be enriched materials, but even dirty materials that get out, we need to be sharing our best practices, our training, our equipment around the world, because that's what keeps each one of our countries safe. It's not a waste of money. It's an investment in the security of your nation, our nation, to make sure that all countries have the resources and the police and security have the resources to keep that country safe, because then it keeps all countries safe. So again, the lack of technology, the need for those agreements, bilateral agreements, treaties, coordination of extraditions, things like that are really important. And I think that's where a lot of the gaps are that are presenting opportunities to, I call it the bad folks.
Thank you, and I love that that interdependent approach to policing. You know, we're not just helping another country, we're helping everyone, and I think this is so true, and I think it's why we're having this conversation today. I want to turn to Alan with a similar question, and then we've got a couple of questions from the chat that he's volunteered to answer live, both about women in law enforcement, how the high number of women in Scotland in law enforcement came up, and lessons for the USA, and then a little bit more about external communications, particularly media during a crisis, particularly multi-jurisdiction, and then the 24 news cycle and social media. What's your information sharing policy? And Vaiko spoke to this a little bit earlier, but would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Thanks, Michelle. Do you want me to answer the question from the original panel point, or
whichever speaks to you?
Okay, I'll start with that first, and I'll come on to the comments in the chat bar and the Q&A. So in terms of your wish list, I guess I've came up with 3 things. So first is investment in people, and specifically 2 things in that space. One of which is invest in training and development, and others, Vaiko and Michael, have spoken about that. I think many agencies, when money is tight, they pull back from training their officers, and I think that is folly, to be honest. And I think we see that create problems further downstream. So I think I would want us to invest more in the development of our officers and staff. Linked to that, I think it creates connections potentially with other jurisdictions, other countries, other organisations. It creates value and it creates legacy. And I think these are really valuable commodities to do. So invest in our people is the first thing. Others, both Vaiko and Michael, have spoken about this, sharing a practice. I think we need to do more in that space. And actually today, the webinar today, the work that UVA through the team there that's ongoing at UVA is a really good example of how we build resources, build shared information, shared purpose. So I think that's the second part of my wish list, is to do more in that space. And then the third, I was kind of reflecting on, we second and send officers overseas to gain valuable insights. And I think Vaiko and Michael both spoke about this, about operational activity, trying to get ahead of the curve in terms of operational challenges. So we've sent folks to Australia and various other different countries to get ahead of the curve in terms of looking what's downstream from us and what we're going to suffer from potentially in the future. We've also brought officers from other countries to work with us operationally. So we have 2 Romanian officers right now in Scotland. Again, because of some of the transnational crimes that we're dealing with, which track back to either Scotland or track back into Romania. So again, we're trying to open up our organisation and try and be a little bit more forward thinking in terms of looking at risk which have arrived or actually we can anticipate are arriving downstream. So, and probably to finish off the point there, I really like Michael's point regarding continuous improvement. It's very much how I lead my function. Because every day, I think, as Michael said, if you're not continually improving it and assessing improvement and trying to move forward, then it's time to stop doing what you're doing and do something different. I couldn't agree more. I think we should encourage our workforce to be curious and be collaborative at every turn. So that's my kind of wish list, if that makes some sense. In terms of the comments, I meant to do them in the chat bar actually, but it was my typing on the screen. But in terms of female, male, you'll see in the comment I've put in there, we roughly take in about 25% female candidates into the organisation versus 75 male. I'm not sure if there's a specific secret recipe to that, but what I probably would say is we do work hard in the kind of flexible working space to try and give those with caring responsibilities the ability to have an hour, to have a work schedule that works for them. Again, that's not without challenge, but that I think is attractive to our workforce. So that's to answer one of those questions. And if it's okay, Michelle, I'll pause there and probably consider the other two in the chat bar if that's okay.
Thank you. I'd love your example of the Romanian officers being sort of embedded with you. I think that's really interesting, and would love if Vaiko and Michael have similar examples. But I know that the question on women in policing was also directed at Vaiko, who's got a little bit of an answer in the chat. But if you could sort of speak to that live as well, that would be great.
Yes, thank you. That's a really great question, and we have been working really hard to increase, not to increase, I think to increase women in policing. It sounds strange, to make police work more, I don't know, attractable, I don't know the right word for it, but to have more women in the police, just to, I think it's to put it brief. So right now we have about 45% of all police officers plus office workers are women. We have 30% of women leaders. 2 of our deputy director generals are women. And I think there's 4 or 5 in total. So in the high command, it's pretty good. When you go down, usually, as I've seen in most police forces, they have women, but they don't have women in the high intensity jobs. So we're really proud that about 35% of our patrol officers that are working on the streets are women. And as I wrote down on the chat, we have realized that diverse teams have really better results than male only or female only teams. So yeah, really proud of that. And I'm not sure if we're going to get to 50-50 in the future. It's not our goal, but our police is open for everybody. So yeah, as I mentioned 4 times already, we're really proud of that.
Great, thank you on that. One of the things that I'm curious about is also that different countries around the world seem to have very different top issues in terms of their crimes, and the crimes that are occurring there, the international cooperation, and things like that. So wanted to ask each of you what's the top priority in crime fighting in your country, and do you have a good sense of around the world how different that is, and is that another area where we could use some more cooperation and collaboration? So Michael, could you start with that?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. It's again, I go back to what I said before. It depends. In a lot of ways, it does depend on geographical issues and so forth, and also there's a difference. It could be political. What is the political issue of whatever administration is in power in a country? It could be citywide. The issues that we deal with in New York City differ from maybe issues we have in Boise, Idaho. And so it's really dependent. But we do see, a lot of regional similarities as well. I've dealt globally and looking at and assisting other countries. You see, in South America, they were looking at a lot of environmental issues, Brazil with the rainforest, and Argentina, and all these countries working together, maybe on climate issues or environmental crimes that were happening. And then maybe in other areas like Southeast Asia, they may be looking more at human trafficking or other issues, Caribbean, maybe gun and stolen motor vehicles. So It really depends. I think that we all face unique challenges, but very similar challenges as well. And it could be dependent on the country and the region that we come from as well. When we talk about transnational crime, when we talk about issues I used to deal with in Interpol, yeah, we fight transnational crime, but that's everything. You could really just group everything. When you talk about organized crime, you're talking about drugs, you're talking about guns, you're talking about stolen motor vehicle, you're talking about just go on and on. So it's really dependent, I would say, in that regard.
Thank you. Alan, Vaiko, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I'll come in, Michelle. Thank you. Yeah, in terms of our kind of priorities in terms of crime, yeah, not dissimilar to what Michael mentioned there, but the usual ones, if that's the right expression, that you're imagining: violence and drugs and serious and organised crime. But also in terms of challenges, the challenges we see are probably not significantly different to most global challenges in law enforcement and public safety. So we're looking at issues such as officer wellness. We're looking at issues such as use of force. You know, we've spent a lot of time with the Police Executive Research Forum colleagues that Michael referenced, looking at use of force both in Scotland, but also in the USA, and drawing some comparisons there about how we can learn from each other. So actually, despite being separated by oceans and seas, we still have many of the same issues. That said, as Vaiko and I will know, Europe is a relatively small landmass compared to the USA. So actually, we've got 28 countries all very, very close to each other. So a lot of that movement of crime and criminality across Europe affects us. And again, we have different geographies and different challenges in different parts of Europe, but a lot of them are common, such as violence, drugs, and organised crime, and the movement of firearms and drugs and that type of thing. So yeah, there is large similarities. I think we have a fairly good handle on kind of an international sort of challenges, and again, they're very varied, but we benefit from collaborations where we hear about other jurisdictions, we hear about other countries and the challenges that they face, and we give them perspectives, and they will also give us perspectives on how we may want to face into them. Probably one of the interesting things that you may find from our approach is our purpose was redefined in 2013 to move out with just a crime focus to a public health focus. So we have well-being within our purpose. Now that's in legislation, which means that we have a duty and an obligation under legislation to consider community well-being in our function. What does that mean is that we are involved in a public health approach to policing. So that will see us being involved in some of the big challenges that many people on this call will be facing, which is mental health, people in crisis, and that type of thing, whereby it's not a traditional policing role, but invariably our officers and staff face that 24/7 because of the type of service that we provide to our communities. So we've had to definitely upskill and step into spaces that we're unfamiliar with, but we're really clear to try and redefine our boundaries in that space, because our officers are not mental health clinicians. They are police officers at the end of the day. So again, trying to define our role and not stray into the role of others is a really important point in that. But I thought the audience might benefit from knowing our purpose is a little bit different probably to what we see within our US colleagues' purpose and vision. So I'll pause there.
Thank you. This point's very, very well taken about the incorporating community well-being and health. Is certainly something we're talking about a lot here in Chicago. So thanks for bringing up that broader issue. And it's certainly something that that Gordon Graham and I talk about in our class quite a bit in risk management. So that's great. We're coming towards the end of our time, so I wanted to just briefly give each of you the opportunity to a closing statement, any key takeaways you really want people to to keep in their minds and mull over once we finish. Anyone want to go first?
Usually the youngest goes first, so I will start. First of all, really good conversation. I think the main takeaway, at least from my side, or if the panel is over, maybe everybody should consider a little bit, is to have as transparent as possible communication with the public, with the media. Give all the information you have. Don't lie. I know it sounds strange, but don't do it. If you don't have anything to say, just don't say it. And also, I would really like to put emphasis on one point that Alan already mentioned. In Estonia, we also see that our first responders, including also police officers, the work is changing a lot. We are also first responders for mental health crisis. We're really trying to find ways how to equip our police officers, not with the right weapons or with the right batons or with the right gas, but with the right skills to first to recognize the mental health crisis or the person being in that, and also some tools how to de-escalate the situation. And I think 1 hour takeaway, and I'm sorry, I'm not answering your question anymore because you didn't ask me the previous one. But when you look at the countries that are bordering Russia, for example, like us, and also one point that I think Michael mentioned is we're currently facing the problem that our own police officers also need help because we have COVID, we have the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, and since Russia is just next door, we have a lot of, but some problems with that. So I think the more we go away from the typical or traditional police officers chasing criminals down the street, the more we go into our own mental health. And I won't say I'm really looking forward to that, but it's a challenge. I think we all should work together, and it's if anybody has some great experience on that, I'm also always listening. Or yep, my English isn't going any better, so thank you, and hope seeing you soon again.
Thank you. Michael?
Thanks, thanks, Michelle. Very, very informative. So I just want to key points, key takeaways. One of the things I do want to just touch on is the question about the women in policing, and just say that we hear it so many times. Law enforcement agencies should reflect the demographic of the society it serves, and so having that basic composition within the law enforcement agencies, I think, is important. It's also a way to build trust with the community, because it's not just the police protecting the community, it's the police protecting the community, but the community protecting the community as well, working together, a group effort. And as far as some of the key points, crime has no borders. We talked about it. We said it a couple of times already in this webinar, is that crime has no borders. And so, you know, we need to be looking at keeping the world safe. What can we do to keep the world safe? Because it goes towards keeping our country safe, keeping our community safe, keeping our families safe, and working together through communication and collaboration, using technology to our advantage, utilizing AI. There was a question about AI. Yeah, do we need to be careful? Sure. Do we need the proper regulation? Sure. But how do we harness the benefits of AI and technology to work in our advantage? Because that's what it's about, staying one step ahead of the criminals and the criminality out there, and making sure that we have the tools that all of the good folks, the good have the tools to ensure the protection and the safety of our communities. Because in the end, we're all in this together. It really is a good versus evil thing, a good versus evil fight, and we have to make sure that we have more of the good and more of us folks working together to defeat those the criminals out there, and having the tools and the know-how to do it, and working together to accomplish that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Alan, I'll give you the last word.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, 3 points from me. So as others have said, for me, communicate, collaborate, and share, really, really important. Second is that continuous improvement piece that I mentioned earlier on. Strive to continually improve and be curious in what you do and everything you do, and your team. And then lastly, it's build and enhance public trust and confidence at every turn, because actually the public and the communities that we serve, they need us to be the top of our game every single day. And unfortunately, they don't remember the 99 times that things went well with policing and public safety. They remember the bad thing, the one thing that didn't go well. And we know that our officers across the globe work incredibly hard to build trust and confidence and be professional and give the best possible service. So I'll probably finish just by saying my details, you've obviously stuck it in the chat. If anyone wants to reach out, I'm more than happy to have a discussion about anything that anyone would wish to chat about. Indeed, if they want to chat about anything that we haven't covered today.
Great. Thank you so much. I learned from all of you, and I know that our audience did as well.